This is pretty interesting right here. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him. That's really interesting. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him. That's saying right there that Jesus looked like a normal guy. And no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. As one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Here's the answer to the question. How can God clear the guilty? How can he do it in a just way? Surely he, Jesus, has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. And they made his grave with the wicked, and with a rich man in his death, Joseph of Arimathea, although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth. What did that just say? There was no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth. That was saying that he was perfect. Yet it was what? It was the will of the Lord to crush him. That right there is saying God crushed Jesus. Why did he crush Jesus? Because this is why. This is the good news of the gospel. We live a horrible, sinful life. We can by no means ever merit our salvation to God. What happens? Jesus comes and lives the perfect life that we never ever lived. We could never ever live. Jesus comes and he lives that perfect life. There's never a lustful thought. There's never a lie. There's never anything. He is the perfect lamb without a blemish that was led to the slaughter. For what reason? Because he was taking all of our iniquities. It says in the scriptures, and I believe it's 2 Corinthians, God made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, so that we could become the righteousness of God. So that right there is saying, and that's a beautiful verse, Jesus lived the perfect life. We lived a wretched, sinful, horrible life. And what did he do? He came and he paid for our sins. How could he pay for our sins? Why? Because he was perfect. He was the perfect sacrifice. All the animals that were sacrificed in the Old Testament, they weren't perfect. They had blemishes. Jesus was the lamb without a blemish. He came and was perfect. He was perfect. He fulfilled all of the law. He fulfilled everything that we could never fulfill. And so that is the only reason why he could be the one to stand in our place, because he was perfect. So what did he do? He stood in our place. He took the wrath that we deserved. He was perfect. He did nothing wrong. But he got crucified. And worse than that, so people oftentimes make a big deal about the crucifixion, which is a huge deal. And they say, oh yeah, the pain of him getting the thorns driven into his hands and the crown. I mean, the stakes driven into his hands and the crown of thorns on his head. But what was the real thing that he did on the cross?
He died.
He took the wrath of God. It says that the wrath of God was poured out on him. That's something that no human being could have ever taken. It's what we would suffer in hell. The wrath of God. So the full wrath of all of our sins was taken and dumped on him. He drank the full cup of God's wrath. That's important. If you can imagine a dam a million and trillion miles long and a million and trillion miles high, and behind it is all the water you could ever imagine, and every molecule of that water was a sin that had been accumulated. That dam breaks and it's headed straight for you. But Jesus pushes you out of the way, and he stands in that place, and he takes the full force of all of that water. That was all the wrath of God that was poured out on him. And what did he cry out at the end when he was finally about to give up his spirit to God? He cried out, "It is finished." What did that mean? And then it says that the veil was torn in two. It means that he took the full wrath of God, and that what happened? The debt had been paid. So legally, we were in God's courtroom, guilty, evil, sinful. We committed every thinkable wrong. And the only way that God could excuse us is if the perfect sacrifice was made in our place to pay our fine and legally